beyond religion. And particularly people signal out Christianity to say, look, see, there's decline. And you often hear, in the media, they often talk about the decline in Christianity, decline in mass attendance, in vocations, whatever they want to choose. They'll say Christianity is in decline. And the sense it is terminal. That's what many secularists believe. It's in terminal decline. Certainly those who profess to live as though God does not exist represent a new phase in human history. Because while there have been at different times, and certainly since about the 18th century, a small core of people who are committed atheists, they've only ever been a minority, and a very small minority. The bulk of societies have had some sort of religious underpinning. In Europe, in Australia, in America, North and South, and different parts of the world, Christianity is a fundamental undercurrent that influences the society and directs the society. And the churches have had a voice in influencing the society. And so similarly, go to other obviously Muslim countries or Hindu countries, or in some Asian countries, Confucianism is still a bit of a presence, although not so much, because China is obviously very heavily influenced by communism and communist atheism. But largely we would say that up till now, societies, and even most primitive societies, have had a religious underpinning to their society, and out of that religious underpinning, that set of beliefs have come a set of moral structures, a set of moral beliefs, and a whole orientation of how the society is meant to run and operate. And so a faith, a spiritual outlook, certain moral standards, certain ritual practices, all these things shape the general day-to-day life of the culture, of the society. Now we're moving to a new phase whereby we're seeing this coming more and more strident in places in Europe, and it's clearly coming with great strength to Australia. We're now seeing people wanting to set up society with no religious underpinning, no religious belief as an underpinning, and therefore no religious belief as a determinant and inspiration to the moral ideals and the cultural life of the nation. This is what we're facing. This is what's happening to Australia. And we need to see very clearly this reality. In particular, secularists are emboldened now to want to deliberately seek to eliminate the presence of Christian influence in all the various spheres of life in our society. One of the things that we're going to face in the immediate future, I believe, will be increasing challenges to religious freedom in Australia. Laws will actually be developed, and I'll give some examples in a moment, that will actually prevent us from being able to live out our religious faith, and particularly to live by certain moral ideals that emanate from our faith. And so you might be aware of the fact that in Victoria there was a recent abortion law reform bill was passed a couple of months back. It's important just to realise what that law said. Given, and I make this point too, given that Victoria established a Bill of Rights. We always talk about a Bill of Rights. They established a Bill of Rights, but in that Bill of Rights, it was very carefully, they avoided the fact that abortion would be one of the elements that where people would be able to have their rights preserved. It quite deliberately avoided that area. And so, even though they had a Bill of Rights, the government was able to pass a bill that denied the right of doctors and nurses to refuse to be involved in or refused to refer abortions on grounds of conscience. So in other words, if somebody comes along to a doctor and says, I want an abortion, and that doctor says, look, because of my moral principles, I can't do it, that doctor could be struck off as a doctor, breaking the law. Or even if the person says, well, if you won't do it, you must refer me to somebody who will do it. And according to that law too, if the doctor says, no, look, I can't do that, I can't be party to that, it goes against my moral principles, that doctor could also be hauled up before a tribunal and say that they are not carrying out the law of the land, and they could be disbarred as a doctor or as a nurse. Nurse, the same thing. What's happening here is that religious freedom of conscience. One thing that we would say, surely that's something that Australian society stands for. We've always stood for respect for individual conscience, individual freedom. We would say that's one of the things that we're very most grateful for in Australian society. And it's been true up till now. There's another law now before that's been developed in Victoria, whereby the law, they want to change the law that had allowed exemptions to churches in the anti-discrimination area. What it means, if this law was actually come through, is that a Catholic hospital or a Catholic school could not refuse an application for employment for somebody who doesn't hold to the moral and spiritual values of that institution. So they want to change the exceptions to the anti-discrimination law. In other words, now they would say, and they've got a sweetener in it. The sweetener is except for core positions. So in other words, if you're teaching religion, they would allow an exception there. But a science teacher, if a science teacher is coming up and is speaking against Christian teaching about creation or whatever, the law would say that teacher has the freedom to be able to do that. You can't say, look, we can't employ this teacher because this teacher doesn't adhere to Christian teaching, Catholic teaching on these particular matters. So secularism, which prides itself in tolerance, as I often say, is tolerant of everything that's going except Christianity, is now becoming more strident and more confident, and laws are actually being passed. And once they get passed in one state and get established, that will just give the lead then for other groups to take it up in their own states, and eventually we'll find ourselves under threat in various places around Australia. So we're going to face increasing challenge in a number of areas, as you know. Yesterday in the news at the ALP conference, you saw the pictures, no doubt, the huge group of people protesting outside. The gay and lesbian groups were well organised and arguing for recognition of gay marriages. And fortunately, we have a Prime Minister who has committed Christian views on this matter. So he's very clear, and the government's taken that stand. And John Howard before too had a similar stand. But what if we get a Prime Minister who is not Christian? These pressures are going to come to bear, and we'll find ourselves facing the legislation that allows for gay marriages and so on. So we've found it already in areas of life. We're going to find it in areas of marriage and family, and as I said, we're going to find it in areas of religious freedom. These will be the three areas where our rights will be diminished in time to come.